A businessman left his disabled daughter with a nanny, but when he returned, he broke down. Richard Anderson adjusted his Brooks Brothers tie while talking on the phone with one of the directors of his company. Another day, another important meeting, another obstacle to overcome in the competitive world of real estate, where he had become a reference in New York City. The businessman barely heard the timid voice of the new nanny trying to explain that little Emily would need special attention that day. With an impatient gesture, he simply nodded, handed her an envelope with emergency cash, and hurried out the door of his Upper East Side mansion. "I'll be back on Thursday. If there's any problem, call my secretary," he said curtly, without even glancing at the room where his 9-year-old daughter waited to say goodbye. Jennifer Davis watched as the businessman got into his black Lexus and drove off. At 34, with extensive experience in pediatric occupational therapy, she hadn't expected to find such a cold atmosphere in that imposing home. Despite all the luxuries money could buy, the house felt empty of human warmth, especially for a child with special needs. "Did Daddy already leave?" Emily asked, maneuvering her wheelchair into the living room. The girl had an angelic face framed by golden curls, with curious, intelligent eyes that contrasted with the fragility of her body. Emily had been born with a spinal cord injury during a complicated birth, leaving her with paralysis in her lower limbs. "Yes, sweetheart. But don't worry. We'll use these days to get to know each other better," Jennifer replied, trying to hide her sadness at seeing the disappointment on the child's face. It was Jennifer's 3rd day on the job, and she had already noticed how Richard avoided spending time with his daughter. The previous nurse, who had worked in the house for 5 years, had left abruptly, leaving Emily visibly shaken by the change. The housekeeper, Mrs. Wilson, was the only constant presence in the girl's life, but her household duties limited the time she could dedicate to her. The house, though spacious and modern, lacked proper adaptations for Emily's mobility. There were unnecessary steps between rooms, furniture blocking pathways, and few therapeutic aids. Everything suggested Richard had chosen the simplest solution, hiring someone to handle the problem rather than adapting his life to his daughter's condition. "Shall we have breakfast? Mrs. Wilson made those cheese rolls you like," Jennifer suggested, gently pushing Emily's wheelchair toward the kitchen. During breakfast, Jennifer carefully observed how Emily held her utensils, how she positioned herself at the table, how her upper muscles responded to movement. There was something there that didn't match the medical report Richard had given her. The girl showed fine motor coordination that suggested potential for far more independence than she was developing. "Emily, have you ever tried moving your chair by yourself?" Jennifer asked casually. The girl lowered her eyes. "Daddy says I might get hurt. He prefers someone to push me." Jennifer took a deep breath. As an occupational therapist specializing in children with physical disabilities, she knew overprotection could be just as harmful as neglect. "And what do you think about that?" Emily played with her napkin, avoiding Jennifer's gaze. "I'd like to try, but I don't want to make Daddy mad." That answer spoke volumes. Richard wasn't just absent. When present, he imposed limitations, based on his own fears, not his daughter's actual needs. That afternoon, while Emily worked on homework sent by her private tutor, Jennifer discreetly explored the rest of the house. In Richard's office, she found a shelf of neatly organized files. One labeled Emily Doctors caught her attention. Normally, Jennifer would respect her employer's privacy, but her professional instinct told her she needed to better understand the girl's medical situation. What she found left her stunned. Reports from various specialists indicated that Emily had great potential to develop greater independence. There were recommendations for intensive physical therapy, therapeutic swimming, and even the possibility of special braces that could help her stand with support. Yet all these suggestions had Richard's notes in the margins, with phrases like "too expensive," "no time to take her," or simply "unnecessary." The most recent report, dated just 2 months ago, was the most alarming. A renowned pediatric neurologist had written, "Emily exhibits neuromotor function above expectations for her condition. With intensive therapy and family support, I believe voluntary movement in her lower limbs could be possible in the near future. This report had a large red drawn by Richard alongside the note, check costs of a full-time specialized facility. Jennifer closed the folder, her heart tightening. Was the father considering institutionalizing his daughter instead of investing in her development? The thought made her sick. When she returned to the living room, she found Emily trying to reach a book on a low shelf, still just out of her wheelchair's reach. "Let me help," she offered, then paused. "Actually, how about trying a different way?" Over the next few hours, Jennifer began implementing what would become a quiet revolution in that house. She showed Emily how to use a long ruler to pull objects closer, how to position her chair at angles for better reach, and how to transfer from the wheelchair to the sofa with minimal assistance. "So you're teaching me tricks," Emily exclaimed, her smile lighting up her whole face. "They're not tricks, Emily, they're techniques, and you have every right to learn them to be more independent." That night, after Emily fell asleep, Jennifer did something beyond her duties as a nanny. She took paper and pen and began drafting a full therapeutic intervention plan for the girl, based on her professional experience and the medical information she'd uncovered. If Richard wasn't willing to provide his daughter with what she needed, Jennifer would find ways to help within the limits of her role. The following days established a new routine. In the mornings after breakfast, Jennifer led stretching and strengthening sessions disguised as play. In the afternoons after private lessons, they practiced transfer and mobility techniques. Mrs. Wilson, initially skeptical of the new approach, quickly became an ally when she saw Emily's enthusiasm. "In 5 years, I've never seen this girl so excited," the housekeeper remarked on the third day, watching Emily move down the hallway on her own. "She just needed a chance, Mrs. Wilson, and to believe in herself." On the fourth day, Jennifer decided to take a bigger risk. Using sofa cushions and makeshift ropes, she created an obstacle course in the living room, teaching Emily more advanced wheelchair maneuvering techniques. "What if my dad finds out we moved the furniture?" Emily asked nervously. "We'll put everything back before he returns," Jennifer assured her. "But don't you think he'd be happy to see how much you're progressing?" Emily fell silent for a moment. "I don't know, Dad doesn't like change much, ever since Mom left." The girl didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Jennifer had already noticed there were no photos of Emily's mother in the house, and no one ever mentioned her name. Something had happened, something that seemed to have frozen Richard in a state of emotional detachment. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On the 5th day, heavy rain cancelled Emily's class. With extra time on their hands, Jennifer proposed a different activity. "How about we paint today?" she suggested, laying out art supplies on the living room table that she had bought with her own money. Emily hesitated. "Daddy doesn't like it when I paint. He says it makes too much of a mess." "We'll clean everything up afterward," Jennifer gently insisted. "Besides, art is great therapy for developing motor skills." Reluctant at first, Emily soon lost herself in the activity. Her paintings, though simple, revealed a unique perspective of the world. She painted her home, but with vibrant colors that contrasted with the cold, minimalist decor Richard had chosen. She painted herself not in a wheelchair, but standing, holding the hand of a figure who appeared to be her father. "Is that how you see yourself in the future?" Jennifer asked, pointing to the drawing. Emily bit her lip. "Sometimes I dream that I can stand, and Daddy takes me to the park, like other kids. But I know it's just a dream." Dreams are important. Emily, they give us direction. Jennifer hesitated before continuing. "You know there are devices that could help you stand with support." The girl's eyes widened. "Really? Why have I never had one?" The question hung in the air, too heavy to answer with complete honesty. "Maybe your father doesn't know about them," Jennifer replied diplomatically. "But we can show him when he gets back." On the eve of Richard's return, Jennifer made a bold decision. Using the emergency money he had left, she bought a simple adapted walker from an orthopedic supply store. It wasn't the ideal model for Emily's condition, but it would serve as an introduction to the concept. When she arrived home with the device, Emily looked at her with a mix of fear and hope. "Do you think I can use this?" "I'm sure of it. But let's take it slow, one step at a time." Jennifer adjusted the walker to Emily's height and carefully helped her into an upright position, supporting some of her weight with her arms. The sensation of being on her feet, even with significant support, brought tears to the girl's eyes. "I'm so tall," she exclaimed, marveling at the new perspective. For 20 minutes they practiced standing, with Jennifer closely monitoring Emily for signs of fatigue. It was just a beginning, but a meaningful one. That night, with Emily peacefully asleep after an emotionally intense day, Jennifer began recording everything in a journal. She noted every small progress, photographed Emily's drawings, and wrote down her professional observations. This would be her report to Richard, concrete evidence that his daughter deserved more than being kept in a glass bubble, or worse, institutionalized. Thursday morning dawned sunny. Jennifer and Emily were having breakfast when they heard the sound of the electronic gate opening. "Daddy's back early," Emily exclaimed, her voice a mix of joy and anxiety. Jennifer felt her own heart race. She had planned to have more time to prepare both Emily and the house for Richard's return. The walker was in the living room, along with Emily's paintings, which they had decided to let dry before putting away. The house wasn't in its usual impeccable order. Firm footsteps echoed down the hallway, and then Richard Anderson appeared in the kitchen doorway. Tall, with graying temples and an impeccably tailored Brooks Brothers suit, he exuded authority. His expression, however, showed confusion at the scene before him, his daughter sitting at the table pouring her own juice. "Good morning," he said, setting his leather briefcase on the counter. "I came back early. The meeting in Washington, D.C. wrapped up sooner than expected." "Daddy?" Emily smiled, but her excitement was met with only a brief nod. "Mr. Anderson, it's good to have you back." Jennifer tried to sound professional despite her nervousness. "Emily and I were just—" "Why is the living room furniture out of place?" he interrupted, his tone controlled but clearly disapproving. "And what is that equipment near the sofa?" Before Jennifer could answer, Emily stepped in. "It's my walker, Daddy. Jennifer taught me how to stand with it." Richard's face hardened. "Stand?" "Emily, you know that's not possible. The doctors were clear about your limitations." "Actually, Mr. Anderson," Jennifer joined in, keeping her voice calm. "The latest medical reports suggest Emily has the potential for much more mobility than she's currently developing. If you'll let me show you some exercises we've been practicing." "Exercises?" Richard stared at her coldly. "Miss Davis, I hired you as a nanny, not a physical therapist. I don't recall authorizing any kind of experimentation." The word fell like a stone between them. Emily lowered her eyes, her enthusiasm visibly fading. "It's not experimentation, sir. They're basic occupational therapy techniques to increase Emily's independence and self-esteem. In just 5 days, she's already able to—" "Enough," Richard cut her off. "Emily, go to your room, please. I need to speak with Miss Davis privately." "But Daddy—" "Now, Emily." With slumped shoulders, the girl maneuvered her wheelchair out of the kitchen, casting a worried glance at Jennifer before leaving. When they were alone, Richard crossed his arms. "I don't know what kind of game you're trying to play, but I don't appreciate decisions being made about my daughter without my explicit permission." Jennifer took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, it's not a game. It's your daughter's future. Emily has potential that's being wasted. The very medical reports you keep in your office confirm that." Richard's face paled. "You've been going through my private documents. I needed to better understand Emily's condition to care for her properly," Jennifer replied, deciding honesty was the best approach. "And what I found deeply concerned me. You're ignoring medical recommendations that could significantly improve her quality of life. You have no idea what you're talking about." His voice trembled slightly. "You don't know Emily like I do. You don't know what's best for her. With all due respect, sir, I'm not sure you do either. I found notes about institutionalizing Emily. Is that what you're planning? Sending her away instead, of helping her reach her potential?" Richard fell silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," he said finally, turning toward the living room. Jennifer followed, tension growing in her chest. In the living room, Richard stopped in front of the walker, and Emily's colorful drawings spread across the coffee table. "Who authorized this?" he asked, pointing at the paintings. "Mr. Anderson, they're just drawings. Emily has artistic talent and—" "I'm not talking about talent," he interrupted, picking up one of the sheets. It was the drawing where Emily had depicted herself standing beside her father. "I'm talking about feeding false hope." Something in the momentary vulnerability in his voice made Jennifer change her approach. "It's not false hope, sir, it's possibility. Emily may never walk independently, that's true, but between never walking and being completely dependent, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities that aren't being explored." Richard set the drawing back on the table with surprising care. "You don't understand us," he murmured. "We've tried before. Every failed attempt only brings more pain." "Pain is part of the process," Jennifer replied softly. "But giving guarantees there will never be progress. And who said I've given up?" Richard turned, a spark of anger in his eyes. "I've sought out the best doctors, paid for the best treatments. If there were a solution, I would have found it by now." "Maybe the solution isn't medical," Jennifer suggested. "Maybe it's human." Richard frowned, confused. "What do you mean? May I show you?" After a moment of hesitation, Richard nodded. Jennifer went to Emily's room and returned with the girl, who looked apprehensive. "Emily, can we show your father what you learned this week?" The girl glanced nervously at her father, who kept a neutral expression. "It's all right," Jennifer encouraged. "Just show how you transfer from the chair to the sofa, like we practiced." With movements still hesitant, but far more confident than 5 days earlier, Emily positioned her chair beside the sofa, locked the wheels, and with minimal support from Jennifer, shifted to the soft seat. "Now, what would you prefer? That I bring your books to you, or that you use the technique you learned?" Emily smiled shyly. "I can reach them myself." Using the adapted ruler Jennifer had taught her, Emily managed to pull a book from the side table onto her lap. Richard watched silently, his face an impenetrable mask. But Jennifer noticed something in his eyes, an emotion he was struggling to contain. "Now, Emily, let's try the walker, just for a moment." With Jennifer's help, Emily returned to her chair and then positioned herself on the walker. With great concentration, she managed to stand upright, supporting part of her, weight on her arms as they had practiced. "Look, Daddy, I'm almost as tall as you," she exclaimed, a radiant smile on her face. It was then that something inside Richard Anderson seemed to break. His face, usually so controlled, twisted into an expression of deep pain. His eyes welled up, and to Jennifer's shock, the powerful businessman covered his face with his hands and collapsed onto the sofa. "Mr. Anderson," Jennifer was alarmed. Emily, still on the walker, looked frightened at her father. "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" Between sobs, Richard shook his head. When he finally found his voice, it was unrecognizable, hoarse, broken. "No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. I did. So many things." Jennifer helped Emily back into her chair and discreetly gestured for the girl to approach her father. Carefully, Emily moved to stand beside him. "Why are you crying, Daddy?" Richard took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Because I just realized how much time I've wasted, how much of you I've missed." He reached out and, perhaps for the first time in years, truly touched his daughter. Not a mechanical touch of assistance, but one of connection. His fingers trembled as he brushed a blonde curl from her face. "You look so much like your mother," he murmured. The same determined eyes. A heavy silence filled the room. Jennifer felt she was witnessing something deeply private, but didn't know how to discreetly excuse herself. "Mr. Anderson, perhaps I should give you two a moment," she offered. Richard looked up as if he'd forgotten she was there. "No," he said, regaining some composure. "Please stay. I think I need to understand exactly what's happened here these past 5 days." In the hours that followed, Jennifer showed Richard the journal she'd kept, documenting every small progress Emily had made. She explained the techniques she'd implemented, the reasoning behind each activity, and how it all aligned with the medical recommendations he'd ignored. "Why do you care so much?" Richard finally asked when Emily had gone to rest after lunch. "You barely know my daughter." Jennifer hesitated, considering how to respond. "Because I see her potential, And because, she paused, because I've been through something similar in a way. My younger brother had cerebral palsy. My parents were told he would never develop basic skills, but they refused to accept that prognosis. With intensive therapy and a lot of love, he achieved far more than any doctor predicted. "Where is he now?" asked Richard. Jennifer's face grew somber. "He passed away 5 years ago from respiratory complications, but he lived 23 full years, Mr. Anderson, not just existing, but truly living. It was because of him that I became an occupational therapist." Richard nodded slowly. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you." Jennifer gathered her courage for the question that had lingered between them from the start. "And Emily? What happened to her mother?" Richard's face hardened momentarily, but then something in him seemed to give way. "Catherine passed away during childbirth. There were complications. The doctors did everything they could, but..." His voice faltered. "Emily survived, but with the spinal injury." "I'm so sorry," Jennifer said softly. "I was on the phone," Richard continued, his voice barely a whisper. "When Catherine started having contractions, I was closing an important deal. I told her I'd be there soon, that I just needed to finish that one call." He swallowed hard. "By the time I got to the hospital, it was too late. I missed her last moments because of a damn contract." The guilt in his voice was palpable. "It wasn't your fault," Jennifer said gently. "Childbirth complications can happen at any time, even with everyone present." "That's what the doctors said too, but here," he pointed to his chest, "I know I failed her. And then I failed Emily too. Every time I look at my daughter, I see the price of my selfishness. She's in that chair because I wasn't there when I should have been." "Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, that's not true. Emily's condition isn't punishment or your fault. It's simply a circumstance the two of you need to face, together." The words hung in the air, heavy with a truth that had been avoided for 9 years. "How can I look her in the eye knowing I'm responsible for her condition? How can I be the father she deserves?" "Starting now," Jennifer replied simply. "Emily doesn't need your guilt. She needs your love, your presence, your support." Richard stood and walked to the window, gazing at the manicured garden Emily was rarely allowed to explore. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "After all this time, I don't know how to be a father." "No one is born knowing," Jennifer answered. "You learn day by day, mistake after mistake, with love as your guide." A contemplative silence followed. Finally, Richard turned to face her. "Miss Davis, Jennifer, I'd like to ask you something." "Yes?" Teach me how to help my daughter, not as a nanny, but as the professional you are. I want to learn everything I need to know to give Emily the life she deserves." It was a surprising request from a man who, just hours earlier, had seemed incapable of admitting any fault or need for guidance. "It would be an honor, Mr. Anderson." "Richard," he corrected. "Please call me Richard." That evening marked the beginning of a transformation in the Anderson household. For the first time since Jennifer had arrived, Richard joined them for dinner at the table. The conversation was initially stiff and awkward, but Emily, with the resilience typical of children, soon filled the silence with stories about her drawings and her new achievements. When Emily went to bed, Richard asked to be part of the nighttime routine, something he usually left entirely to the nanny. With Jennifer's quiet guidance, he helped his daughter brush her teeth, move from the bath to her chair and pick out pajamas. "Daddy?" Emily called out, just as he was about to leave her room after saying goodnight. "Yes, Princess." "Are you going to be mad at Jennifer? She was only trying to help me." The question, so direct and worried, pierced him like an arrow. "No, Emily, I'm not mad. In fact, I think I should thank her and apologize to you." "To me? Why?" Richard sat on the edge of the bed, searching for the right words. "For not being the father you deserve, for not being present, for not seeing how capable you are." Emily's eyes widened in surprise at hearing such an admission from her father, who was always so controlled and distant. "It's okay, Daddy, you were busy." The simple acceptance and lack of resentment in her voice only deepened Richard's guilt. How could his daughter be so understanding when he had been so neglectful? "No, Emily, it's not okay. Being busy is no excuse. You're the most important person in my life, and I promise that from now on, my actions will show it." A smile lit up the little girl's face. "So, can I keep using the walker?" "Yes," Richard smiled. "And more than that, we'll look for better equipment, new therapies, whatever can help you be more independent and happy." "And can we paint more?" Richard chuckled softly, thinking of the immaculate living room he had always insisted on, and how Emily's colorful drawings had brought more life to that space in 5 days than the expensive decor had in years. "Yes, we can paint more. We can even turn one of the spare rooms into an art studio for you if you'd like." Emily's eyes sparkled with a joy Richard realized, painfully, he had seen far too rarely. "Thank you, Daddy." "No, Emily, thank you." When he stepped out of the room, he found Jennifer in the hallway. "Is she asleep?" the therapist asked. "Almost. She's happy." Richard hesitated. "Thank you for today." "I was just doing my job." "No, you did much more. You forced me to see what I've been avoiding for years." He glanced back at Emily's closed door. "I have a lot to make up for." "What matters is that you're starting now," Jennifer replied. "If I may make a suggestion." "Of course. Tomorrow's Friday. Why not take the day off and spend it with Emily? You could take her to the park. She never leaves this house except for doctor's appointments." The simple suggestion left Richard speechless. When was the last time he had taken a day just to be with his daughter? He couldn't remember. "That's a great idea," he agreed. "I'll reschedule my meetings." The next day, Emily could hardly believe it when her father walked into her room still in his pajamas, announcing they'd spend the day together. "No work?" she asked skeptically. "No work," he confirmed. "I'm all yours today." After breakfast, with Jennifer's guidance, Richard learned how to transfer Emily into the car, fold her wheelchair and store it in the trunk. It shocked him to realize he had never bothered to learn such basic tasks for his daughter's care. At Central Park, Emily breathed in the fresh air and freedom like she rarely had before. Richard pushed her chair along shaded paths, stopping to watch birds, listen to street musicians and buy popcorn from a vendor. "Why have we never come here before?" Emily asked, delighted by the experience. The innocent question felt like an accusation to Richard. "Because I was too busy hiding, Emily. But that's going to change, I promise." When they returned home, exhausted but happy, Richard asked Jennifer to speak in his office. "I want to propose something," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I don't want you working as a nanny anymore." Jennifer's heart sank. Despite their closeness the day before, was he still planning to let her go? "I understand," she began, trying to maintain her composure. "No, I don't think you understand," Richard interrupted with a faint smile. "I want to hire you officially as Emily's occupational therapist, with a salary that matches your qualifications and experience. And I want you to help me find the best equipment, specialists and therapies for her. No budget restrictions." Jennifer felt a wave of relief and excitement. "That would be wonderful. I already have so many ideas that—" "But there's one condition," Richard interrupted, his tone turning serious. "I need you to be absolutely honest with me. If I'm doing something wrong, if I'm hindering Emily's progress, I need to know. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us so much as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story." "You have my word," Jennifer assured him. "And in return, I ask just one thing." "What?" "That you're patient with yourself too. Changes in routine and relationships take time." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair." The following days brought intense transformation to the Anderson household. With Richard's approval and resources, Jennifer began implementing a full therapeutic program for Emily. A spare room was converted into a physical therapy space, equipped with modern machines. A water therapist was hired for sessions in the pool, which until then had been purely decorative. A new pediatric specialist in spinal injuries was consulted, but more important than the physical changes were the shifts in routines and relationships. Richard restructured his work schedule, delegating more responsibilities to his directors, so he could be home every night for dinner and every morning for breakfast. He started actively participating in Emily's therapies, learning exercises, to practice with her on weekends. The house, once cold and sterile, began to reflect personality. Emily's drawings were framed and displayed on the walls. Photos of the girl in her activities replaced the impersonal artwork that had decorated the halls. At the end of the second week of this new phase, after Emily had gone to bed, Richard found Jennifer in the living room reviewing her notes. "May I join you?" he asked, holding a glass of wine. "Of course," Jennifer replied, closing her notebook. "I was just organizing next week's program." Richard sat on the sofa beside her. "Emily seems so happy," he remarked. "I never thought small changes could make such a difference." "They're not small changes, Richard. It's a revolution in her life, and in yours too, from what I can see." He smiled, a genuine smile he rarely showed. "Yes, it's true. I'm sleeping better than I have in years. It's like a weight has been, not removed, but lightened." "Is the guilt still there?" Jennifer asked gently. Richard took a sip of wine before answering. "Yes, I think it always will be, but at least now I'm doing something about it instead of hiding from it." "You know what else might help?" Jennifer suggested, hesitant to tread on such delicate ground. "Talking about Catherine with Emily. She hardly mentions her mother. I think she's learned not to bring it up to avoid making you uncomfortable." Richard's expression hardened momentarily. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I understand. But Emily deserves to know her mother, even if it's through your memories. Just think about it." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but contemplative. Finally, Richard changed the subject. "I have a business trip scheduled for next week to Miami. It's important, I can't cancel." "Emily will understand," Jennifer assured him. "What matters is keeping communication open." "Actually," Richard cleared his throat, "I was thinking maybe the two of you could come with me. We would stay at a hotel on South Beach." Emily had never seen the ocean. The proposal surprised Jennifer. It was a big step for a man who, until recently, had kept his daughter practically in seclusion. "I think she'd love it," she replied, smiling. "And we could adapt her therapies for the beach environment. The sand and water offer excellent sensory stimulation." "Then it's settled. I'll talk to her tomorrow." When Richard stood up to leave, he paused briefly. "Jennifer, thank you. Not just for what you've done for Emily, but for giving me a second chance to be a father." "You've always been a father, Richard. You just needed to allow yourself to be." The next morning, Emily was radiant with joy at the news of the trip to Miami. While she and Jennifer looked up information about the city online, the phone rang. It was Margaret Wilson, Catherine's mother and Richard's mother-in-law. "She's coming here," Richard announced tensely after hanging up. "She said we need to talk." Jennifer immediately noticed the change in his demeanor. The relaxed, open man of the past few days seemed to have vanished, replaced by the defensive, closed-off version from before. "Is this a problem?" she asked discreetly when Emily was distracted with her drawings. "Margaret and I have a complicated relationship," Richard admitted. "She never forgave me for what happened to Catherine. And to be fair, maybe she's right. I understand. Do you want me to leave when she arrives?" "No," he answered quickly. "Actually, I'd like you to stay. Emily feels safe with you, and I suspect I'll need an ally." 2 hours later, Margaret Wilson arrived. She was an elegant woman in her mid-60s, with the same shade of blonde hair as Emily, though hers was clearly dyed. Her cold gaze swept the room, immediately noting the changes in decor. "Grandma!" Emily exclaimed, quickly wheeling over to greet her. Margaret's face softened at the sight of her granddaughter. "My little angel." She hugged Emily warmly, but her expression hardened. Again, as she turned to Richard, "I see you've made some changes here." "Yes," he replied simply. "This is Jennifer Davis, Emily's occupational therapist." Margaret assessed Jennifer with a calculating look. "A therapist? I thought you considered these approaches. What was it you called them?" "Ah, yes, false hope." The biting remark made Richard flush. "I changed my mind," he said curtly. "Emily has made significant progress." "Show Grandma your walker," Emily urged excitedly. Under Margaret's watchful eye, Emily demonstrated her new equipment and abilities. To Jennifer's surprise, The grandmother seemed to have considerable knowledge about spinal injury therapies. "You should be using dynamic braces as well," Margaret remarked, examining the walker, "and electrical stimulation for the leg muscles." "We're implementing things gradually," Jennifer explained. "First, we established a foundation of trust and self-esteem." Margaret nodded, seeming to approve of something for the first time. Sensible. Emily always had potential. What was missing was investment. The word carried an implicit accusation that no one missed. During lunch, the tension between Richard and Margaret remained palpable, though both made an effort to maintain civility in front of Emily. When the girl went to rest after lunch, however, the masks came off. "What's the real reason for your visit, Margaret?" Richard asked bluntly. The older woman stared at him coldly. "I received an interesting call from Dr. Sarah Thompson last week." Richard visibly paled. "And?" "She informed me you cancelled the appointment to discuss transferring Emily to institutional care. Your words, not mine." Jennifer felt a chill. So it was true. Richard had actually considered sending Emily away. "That was before," he replied, his voice tense. "I changed my mind." "Did you really?" Margaret raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Or is this just another one of your fleeting guilt impulses that'll pass soon enough?" "That's not fair, Margaret." "Fair?" Her voice rose. "Slightly. Fair would be my daughter still being alive. Fair would be Emily having a present father from day one, not just when a stranger points out the obvious." Richard lowered his head, unable to argue. "She's right," Jennifer interjected, feeling she had to defend Richard, even if only partially. "He's made mistakes, but he's genuinely committed now. The changes we've seen in Emily these past few weeks prove that." Margaret turned her attention to Jennifer. "Miss Davis, I don't doubt your intentions or competence, but I've known Richard longer than you have. When the novelty wears off, when the challenges get harder, when an irresistible business deal comes along, he'll fall back into old habits." "That's not true," Richard protested. "Not this time." "Prove it," Margaret challenged. "For 9 years I've heard this time is different. What's changed now?" Richard took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "I've changed, Margaret. I finally understood what I was doing to Emily. And to myself. I was hiding behind guilt instead of facing it." Pretty words. But actions speak louder. "That's why we're implementing a full therapeutic program," he continued. "That's why I restructured my company to be more present. That's why—" He hesitated. "That's why I'm considering sharing more about Catherine with Emily." That last statement finally seemed to crack Margaret's skepticism. Her eyes welled up. "You never talk about her." "Because it hurts. It still hurts so much. But Emily deserves to know her mother, even if it's through our memories." Margaret discreetly wiped away a tear. "Well, that would be a start." The conversation continued for a while longer, with Margaret gradually lowering her guard as she saw photos of Emily's recent activities and heard Jennifer's plans for her development. By the time she prepared to leave, her tone had softened considerably. "Let's see about this trip to Miami then," she said to Emily, who had returned from her nap. "Take lots of pictures for me." "You could come with us," Richard suggested, surprising everyone, including himself. Margaret studied him, gauging the sincerity of the offer. "Maybe next time," she finally replied. "But I'll be watching closely." "I always will." The veiled threat was clearly directed at Richard, who nodded, accepting the challenge. After Margaret left, Richard retreated to his office, visibly shaken by the encounter. Jennifer found him there an hour later, staring at a photograph she'd never seen before. A young blonde woman smiling at the camera with the same lively eyes as Emily. "Catherine?" she asked softly. Richard nodded without looking away from the photo. "Margaret's right about one thing," he said, his voice distant. "I've promised change before. In the early years, I'd have bursts of involvement, followed by long months of emotional distance. I can't blame her for doubting me. What's different now?" He finally set the photo down. "Before, I changed out of guilt. It was an obligation, a burden. Now," he searched for the words. "Now it's out of love. Because I truly want to know my daughter, not just make up for something I can't change. Jennifer smiled. That's exactly what Margaret needs to see. And what Emily is already starting to feel. The preparations for the Miami trip filled the following days. Emily, who had never traveled beyond New York City, was glowing with excitement. Jennifer was handling the practical details, ensuring the hotel had proper accessibility, checking portable equipment they could bring, planning appropriate activities. Richard, meanwhile, dedicated himself to a personal project. He gathered old photographs of Catherine and began organizing them into an album to show Emily. The process was painful, but also cathartic. For the first time in 9 years, he allowed himself to relive happy memories instead of just the final trauma. On the evening before the trip, while Emily was already asleep, Richard invited Jennifer for coffee on the balcony. "I need to ask you a professional question," he said after a few moments of comfortable silence. "Of course. At the current pace, what are the real long-term possibilities for Emily? Don't give me false hope, please, just the truth." Jennifer carefully considered her response. "Based on what I've observed and the medical reports, I believe Emily has the potential to develop significant trunk control and possibly some voluntary movement in her lower limbs. It's unlikely she'll walk independently, but with the right equipment, she could achieve assisted vertical mobility, which brings enormous physical and psychological benefits." Richard nodded, absorbing the information. "What about the rest? Regular school, college, independent living? All of that is absolutely possible. Emily is smart, adaptable, and determined. With the right support, I see no limits to her academic and social development." A relieved smile appeared on Richard's face. "That's all I needed to know." The next morning brought the usual chaos of travel preparations, intensified by the special care Emily required. Still, by 10 a.m., they were all in the car on the way to the airport. Just as Richard was about to start the engine, his phone rang. He checked the number and frowned. "It's Michael, my business partner. I need to take this." Jennifer noticed the shift in his body language as he spoke. From relaxed and excited, Richard grew increasingly tense, his voice taking on the professional tone he'd rarely used at home these past few days. "What? Today isn't possible. We're leaving for Miami. Can't the consortium wait until Monday?" He paused, listening. "I understand the urgency, but yes, I know how much this contract is worth." Emily, in the adapted back seat, watched, her father with growing apprehension. Jennifer held her hand, trying to offer reassurance. "All right, Michael," Richard finally relented. "Give me an hour to sort things out." When he hung up, he avoided looking back, knowing he'd see the disappointment on his daughter's face. "Something unexpected came up," he explained, still staring ahead. "The Chinese consortium we're trying to bring to the United States sent their representatives early. They're at the office right now. Are we not going anymore?" Emily's small voice carried a resignation that broke Jennifer's heart. Richard finally turned to face her. "No, Emily, we're going, just..." He hesitated. "I need to handle this first. It'll be quick." "I've heard that before," the girl murmured, looking down. The comment hit Richard like a physical blow. It was exactly what Margaret had predicted. At the first sign of difficulty, he'd put work first again. "1 hour," he promised firmly. "Just 1 hour at the office, then we'll go straight to the airport. We'll still make the same flight." Emily didn't respond. The atmosphere in the car had shifted drastically, the morning's excitement replaced by a familiar tension. Richard drove to his office on 5th Avenue, parking in his reserved spot. "You can wait at the rooftop restaurant," he suggested, guilt clear in his voice. "I'll meet you as soon as I'm done." Jennifer silently agreed, helping Emily out of the car. The girl remained stubbornly silent, her small face a mask of controlled disappointment that no 9-year-old should know how to wear so well. In the panoramic restaurant on the top floor of the building, Jennifer tried to cheer up Emily by pointing out the spectacular city view and promising they'd soon see the ocean. The girl responded with monosyllables, her eyes constantly drifting to the wall clock. An hour passed, then an hour and a half. As they neared 2 hours of waiting, Emily finally voiced what they both feared. "He's not coming, is he?" Jennifer fought back her own disappointment. "Let's give it a few more minutes." Just then, her phone rang. It was Richard, "The meeting is running longer than expected," he said, his voice tense. "These are important partners. I can't just get up and leave." "Richard, Emily is waiting. The flight is in 3 hours." I know." He sounded genuinely distressed. "Look, here's an idea. Why don't the two of you head to the airport? I'll try to wrap this up as fast as I can and catch the next flight out today." Jennifer felt frustration rising. "You promised her, Richard." "And I'll keep it," he insisted. "Say, I'll be in Miami tonight, I swear, just a few hours later." "I'll talk to Emily," Jennifer replied coldly, hanging up before she said something she'd regret. When she explained the situation to the girl, she saw her eyes well up with tears she bravely tried to hold back. "It's okay," Emily said, with a maturity that was painful to witness. "I'm used to it." That simple phrase, "I'm used to it," held years of broken promises and dashed hopes. Jennifer made a decision right then. "No, Emily, it's not okay, and you shouldn't have to be used to this." Grabbing her phone, Jennifer typed a direct message to Richard. "We'll wait 1 more hour. Not for you, but because Emily deserves a chance to see that people can keep their promises." In Richard's office, the meeting with the Chinese executives and his partner Michael was reaching a critical point. The consortium offered a partnership that would practically double the value of Richard's company, the kind of deal that, just a few weeks ago, would have been his top priority. When his phone buzzed with Jennifer's message, Richard felt a wave of shame. There he was, repeating the exact same pattern, prioritizing business over his daughter. Margaret had been right. At the first real test, he had failed. As Michael enthusiastically detailed the financial projections, Richard watched the politely interested expressions of the Chinese executives. What would they think if they knew that, to be in this meeting, he had left his daughter waiting? What kind of man does that over and over? "The kind of man who promised change and failed at the first opportunity," he answered himself. "Mr. Anderson," one of the executives called, "do you agree to the terms?" Richard looked at the documents in front of him. The contract meant financial. Security, international expansion, recognition, everything he'd ever sought in his career. And then he pictured Emily's face, with that look of resignation no child should ever have. "Gentlemen," he said, standing abruptly, "I apologize, but I can't continue this meeting right now." Michael stared at him, stunned. "Richard, what are you doing?" "Keeping an important promise," he replied simply. "My daughter is waiting for me, and I've kept her waiting far too long." "But this contract—" Michael gestured to the documents. "It'll be here on Monday, or it won't." Richard turned to the Chinese executives and in English continued, "Gentlemen, we deeply value your interest in our company, but I have an unbreakable commitment to my family today. If we can reschedule this discussion for Monday, I'll be eternally grateful. If not, I'll completely understand." After a moment of surprised silence, the eldest executive smiled faintly. "Family is important. Monday works perfectly for us." Richard thanked him with a respectful nod and, ignoring Michael's furious glare, quickly gathered his belongings and left. When he rushed into the restaurant, there were only 10 minutes left before the extra hour Jennifer had given him expired. Emily and she were seated near the window, the girl distractedly gazing at the city below. "Shall we go to Miami?" Richard asked, still breathless from running up the stairs. The elevator would have taken too long. Emily turned to him, her eyes lighting up momentarily with hope before settling back into cautious expression. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied, kneeling beside her chair. "And I promise I'll never make you wait like this again, Emily. Never again." The trip to Miami ended up being everything Emily had dreamed of. The luxurious hotel in South Beach offered full accessibility, allowing the girl to explore independently. Jennifer adapted therapeutic sessions for the beach, using sand and water as natural resistance elements. Richard, keeping his promise, left his phone off most of the day, actively participating in every activity. On their last night, while Emily slept in the adjacent room of the suite, Richard and Jennifer talked on the balcony, watching the moonlit ocean. "Thank you for not giving up," he said simply, "on Emily or on me." "Richard, I need to be clear about something," Jennifer replied, her tone professional. "What happened at the office was an important test you passed, But there will be other challenges. I know. Emily is making incredible progress, but there will be setbacks, plateaus, frustrations. Her journey won't be linear. Neither will mine, he admitted. But I'm committed, Jennifer. Truly committed. She smiled, allowing herself to believe him. Did you see how Emily reacted when she managed to stand in the water today? That joy, that sense of accomplishment, it's worth more than any contract. Yes, Richard agreed, his eyes shining with the memories of the day. It's funny. I spent years building a fortune, believing I was creating security for Emily, but what she really needed was much simpler and much harder to give. Your presence, Jennifer finished. My presence, my time, my heart. The only things I was holding back. Upon returning to New York City, the transformation in the Anderson household continued. Emily's therapy program expanded with new specialists and equipment. A heated pool was installed specifically for hydrotherapy. The studio bedroom became the girls' favorite place, its walls covered in increasingly complex and expressive artwork. But the most significant change came one evening when Richard finally brought out Margaret's photo album to show Emily. "Who's this?" the girl asked, pointing to a smiling young woman on a beach. "Your mother," Richard answered softly. "That was our first weekend together, in the Hamptons." Emily studied the photo with fascination. "Did she like the beach as much as I do?" "She loved it. In fact, you're a lot like her, not just in looks." "Really? Really? Your determination, your creativity, all of that comes from her." For hours they explored the album, with Richard sharing stories he'd kept locked away for so long. Jennifer watched discreetly from the doorway, her heart warmed by the scene. In the weeks that followed, new challenges arose. Michael, Richard's business partner, showed up unannounced at the Anderson home. Furious over losing the Chinese contract, which had gone to a competitor instead. He demanded an explanation and, in a moment of frustration, suggested that Richard was emotionally compromised and should consider selling his share of the company. The proposal, though presented as an attack, planted a seed in Richard's mind. What kind of business life did he really want now? Did the company he had built with so much sacrifice still represent his values and aspirations? Meanwhile, Margaret, Wilson was becoming a more frequent presence in her granddaughter's life. Initially cautious about Richard, she gradually recognized the genuine changes in his behavior. Her knowledge about spinal cord injury treatments, the result of years of independent research, became a valuable resource. "I never thought I'd say this," she confessed to Jennifer during a visit, "but Richard has truly surprised me. He's finally being the father Emily deserves." Jennifer, in turn, faced her own dilemma. After 3 months of working with the Anderson family, she received an offer to lead a therapeutic center specializing in children with disabilities in Boston. It was the kind of professional opportunity she had always dreamed of, the chance to help dozens of children like Emily, to implement innovative methodologies on a larger scale. But the idea of leaving Emily, just when her progress was most promising, filled her with deep anguish. The girl had become far too important in her life. She decided not to mention the offer right away, giving herself time to think. However, Emily, with her sharp perception, noticed subtle changes in Jennifer's behavior. "Are you sad?" she asked one day during a painting session. "Not sad, just thoughtful," Jennifer replied evasively. "Is it because of that phone call yesterday? I heard you talking about a new job." Jennifer sighed. She should have been more discreet. "It's a possibility, yes, but nothing's decided yet." Emily's face twisted with worry. "Are you going to leave me?" "Emily, even if I work somewhere else, it doesn't mean—" "Everyone leaves me," the girl interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom left, the other nurses left, now you're leaving too." Jennifer felt her heart tighten. "It's not like that, sweetheart. Some people go, others stay, others remain in different ways. Your dad didn't leave, your grandma didn't leave." But Emily was inconsolable. Her fear of abandonment, deeply rooted after years of loss and disappointment, was in full force. In the following days, Jennifer noticed changes in Emily's behavior. The girl, usually enthusiastic about her therapies, became reluctant and unmotivated. She complained of pains she hadn't mentioned before. In one particularly alarming episode, she pretended she could no longer transfer herself to the couch, a skill she had mastered weeks ago. "What's going on, Emily?" Jennifer asked after watching the girl fail at an exercise she had easily done the day before. Emily looked away. "I can't do it anymore." "You can't, or you don't want to." The girl stayed silent, but her trembling lower lip spoke volumes. It was Richard who finally figured out what was happening. "She thinks if she gets worse, you won't leave," he explained to Jennifer privately. "It's an emotional survival strategy. But I haven't even decided if I'll take the job. For Emily, the mere possibility is already too threatening." Emily's feigned regression ended up having real consequences. During her monthly neurology appointment, concerned about the symptoms she reported, the doctor recommended additional tests and considered adjusting her medication. Jennifer, torn apart by guilt when she realized what she had triggered, decided to address the situation directly. On a Sunday afternoon, while Richard had gone out for a run, another healthy habit he'd recently adopted, she sat with Emily in the garden. "We need to talk about something important," she began, direct yet gentle. "About the exercises you've been forgetting to do." Emily lowered her head, her cheeks flushing. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." "And it's okay, Emily. I understand why you're doing this." The girl stayed silent for a moment, then whispered almost inaudibly, "If I get sick again, you won't leave." Jennifer felt her heart break. "Oh, Emily." She took the girl's small hands in hers. "That's not how it works. Pretending to regress won't change anything. It'll only hurt your own progress." "But what if you take that new job?" "First, I haven't decided yet. Second, even if I do, it wouldn't mean disappearing from your life. Boston isn't that far. We could see each other often." Emily didn't seem convinced. "Daddy used to say he'd visit when he traveled, but he never did." The comparison stung, but Jennifer understood where it came from. "Your father's different now, isn't he? He's learned and changed. We all can change and grow, Emily, even you." The conversation continued as Jennifer patiently explained how pretending was leading to unnecessary medical decisions and how it could actually harm her real treatment. Gradually, Emily understood the seriousness of the possible consequences. "I'm sorry," she finally admitted. "I just didn't want you to leave." "I know, sweetheart, but I need you to trust me. Whatever I decide, you'll always matter to me." When Richard returned from his run, he found the two embracing in the garden, Emily's small body shaking with relieved sobs. Jennifer briefly explained the situation, and he nodded in understanding. "I think we all need a family talk," he suggested. That evening after dinner, the three sat in the living room for an open discussion. Richard began by surprising both Jennifer and Emily. "First, I want to share some thoughts I've been having," he said, unusually solemn. "These past few months, I've been rethinking a lot, especially my career and priorities." He paused as if organizing his thoughts. "After the incident with Michael and the Chinese contract, I realized the company I built no longer reflects my current values. I've been consulting advisors about restructuring possibilities." "What kind of restructuring?" Jennifer asked, intrigued. "I'm considering selling part of the company, not because of pressure from Michael, but to redirect it." He smiled at Emily. "Inspired by you, sweetheart, I've thought about creating a division focused on assistive technologies and accessibility." Emily's eyes widened. "Like my walker?" "Exactly. And other equipment for people with special needs. So I've done research, and there's a huge demand for affordable quality solutions in the United States." The idea was surprising and inspiring. Richard Anderson, the relentless businessman who'd built a real estate empire, was now considering redirecting it toward a social purpose aligned with his daughter's needs. "And there's more," he continued, now looking directly at Jennifer. "Part of the plan includes an integrated therapeutic center, offering quality care at affordable prices, with scholarships for low-income families." Jennifer's heart raced. "A therapeutic center?" "Yes," Richard smiled. "And I'd like you to run it, Jennifer, here in New York City, not Boston." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Emily looked from one adult to the other, hope shining in her eyes. "Does that mean you can stay?" she finally asked. Jennifer was still processing the unexpected offer. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. The opportunity to create a center based on her own therapeutic vision, with proper resources and institutional support. "It's an incredible proposal, Richard, but it's a huge project. Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he replied firmly. "For 9 years I used my talent for business only to accumulate wealth. Now I want to use it for something that truly matters." 3 months later, the Catherine Anderson Therapeutic Center opened on a spacious property in the south side of New York City. The complex included therapeutic pools, state-of-the-art physical therapy rooms, art studios, and an adapted park where children with various disabilities could play independently and safely. On opening day, Emily was radiant. For the special occasion, Jennifer had worked with an engineer to create a custom orthotic that, combined with an advanced walker, allowed Emily to stand with more stability than ever before. The ceremony was simple but moving. Margaret Wilson, now reconciled with her son-in-law, cut the ribbon alongside Emily. Michael, who had initially resisted the company's redirection, became an enthusiastic supporter after seeing the project's potential impact. As guests explored the facilities, Emily pulled Jennifer and Richard to a quiet corner of the garden. "I have a surprise," she announced mysteriously. With determination in her eyes, the girl adjusted her orthotic, gripped her walker firmly, and with concentrated effort, took a small, deliberate step forward. Richard gasped, tears immediately filling his eyes. "Emily, I've been practicing in secret with Grandma," she explained, beaming. "I wanted it to be a surprise for today." It was a small step, achieved with great effort and significant support. But for everyone who knew Emily's journey, it represented something monumental, not just a physical breakthrough, but the symbol of a complete transformation, of a family that had found its way back to one another. Richard knelt to meet his daughter at eye level. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. So proud." "And I'm proud of you, Dad," Emily replied simply, stretching out her arms for a hug that for a few seconds erased all the pain and separation of the past years. Jennifer watched the scene, her own face wet with tears. Of all the therapeutic progress she had witnessed in her career, none compared to the emotional healing she had seen in this family. When Emily turned to hug her too, Jennifer felt deep gratitude for the path that had led her here, a path that had begun with a distant father, a resigned child, and a cold home that now overflowed with life, color, and love. "Thank you for not giving up on us," Emily whispered in her ear. "Thank you for teaching us not to give up too." As they returned to the ceremony, Richard discreetly took Jennifer's hand. "I don't have enough words to express what you've brought to our lives," he said softly. "You two did the hard work," she replied. "I just showed the way." Richard smiled, watching Emily move determinedly with her walker, greeting guests who applauded her progress. Sometimes showing the way is the greatest gift anyone can give. Months later, the Catherine Anderson Therapeutic Center became a national benchmark for pediatric rehabilitation. Under Jennifer's direction, it implemented innovative protocols that attracted families from across the country. The business model Richard developed ensured that for every family that could afford treatment, 3 others received free or subsidized care. Emily, now 10 years old, attended a mainstream school for the first time, adapting with the resilience that had become her trademark. At home, the once cold and impersonal mansion had become a lively space, with framed drawings on the walls, therapeutic equipment seamlessly integrated into the decor, and photographs of Catherine displayed with love and respect. Margaret Wilson, now fully reconciled with her son-in-law, had become a constant presence, bringing the grandmotherly warmth Emily so desperately needed. Even Michael, initially skeptical about the company's new direction, acknowledged that the assistive technology division was not only doing social good, but also generating significant financial returns through innovative patents. One sunny afternoon, as Emily practiced with her new equipment in the garden, Jennifer found Richard watching his daughter with an expression of peace that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, joining him. "How unpredictable life is," he replied. "A year ago, I was a different man, living a different life. Obsessed with work, emotionally distant, running away from the only person who truly mattered." He paused, watching Emily stand on her own for nearly a minute, a new record. "And then you came along and turned my world upside down, in the best possible way." Jennifer smiled. "You were ready for change, Richard. You just needed a nudge." "A nudge?" He chuckled softly. "More like an earthquake." Emily, noticing them talking, waved excitedly before refocusing on her exercise. "Look at her," Richard continued, admiration in his voice. "So determined, so brave. She's always been like this, and I almost missed it all." "But you didn't," Jennifer reminded him. "That's the important part of the story." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "You know, in business I always prided myself on never making the same mistake twice. But in my personal life, I repeated the same pattern for years. Distance, work, guilt, an endless cycle. And now? Now I understand that being a father isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's not about fixing the past, but building the future." He smiled at Jennifer. "And it's not a journey you take alone." Just then, Emily managed 2 consecutive steps with her new equipment, her face lighting up with triumph. "Daddy, Jennifer, did you see?" "We did, sweetheart," Richard exclaimed, rushing to her side to celebrate her progress. "You're amazing!" Jennifer watched father and daughter embrace, laughing together under the afternoon sun. The transformation was complete. Not just Emily's physical progress, gradually regaining movements doctors had deemed unlikely, but the emotional one as well. A businessman who had once left his disabled daughter in a nanny's care had become a devoted and loving father. A girl resigned to loneliness had found her voice and her potential, and a therapist who had arrived for a temporary job had found a family. Some journeys begin with small steps, others with great upheavals. The Anderson families had started with both. An emotional collapse that paved the way for the small, precious steps they would continue taking together, one day at a time, leaning on each other along the way. The end. Dear listener, if this story touched your heart, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Share in the comments what moved you most and where you're tuning in from. A like is a virtual hug for our team, and by subscribing to the channel, you ensure stories like this keep coming your way. Your companionship is what keeps us going.